want to thank everyone for coming on and listening to another great episode of the Unsavory Politik. Again, this is the political segment that gets more in depth for the Jabari Vok podcast. And please like, share, and follow for Jabari Vok Media. We are on everywhere where you get your podcasts. And be ready for the new Studio 3A podcast that's hosted by me, Chris Brewer, and Tim Gardner, Bridgeport, Connecticut. So without further ado, we're going to get right into it. I have another awesome guest, Chris Richards of the Eclectic Radical. Please check out that podcast. The link will definitely be in the description. Let's get him right on. Hello, Chris.
Good morning. I'm really glad to be here today. Thanks, Jamar.
Yes, Alexy Suarez will be on here momentarily, but when we were talking before we started recording about the whole like Superman beating up the landlords thing and how how social media seems to be the radical poison now when it was comic books.
People forget the time that superheroes were created, especially because there's this tendency to look at some of the later stuff like Batman being a billionaire who beats up criminals. And to see superheroes as being sort of reactionary, which is true in some ways. There's always been that streak in some of those comics. But the thing you have to remember about the 1930s when these characters were created is that the cities that creators came from were racked by the Depression and in the grips of various kinds of political controversy. Brooklyn, which was where quite a few comic book creators were from, but most notably Jack Kirby from Marvel and then later on the New Gods at DC, were from Brooklyn. And Brooklyn was the headquarters of the Communist Party USA in the 1930s and the home of the Popular Front. So when Captain America is from Brooklyn in the 1930s and he punches Nazis, there's a symbolism to this. The kid from Brooklyn punching Nazis is a subtle, even if these are not the intended politics of the creator, this is still the atmosphere of the time. And a kid from Brooklyn punching Hitler is a kind of a communist message on one level.
Yeah.
And you see the same thing in Superman, where the creators of Superman, particularly Jerry Siegel was involved in the Jewish Socialist Bund as a young adult and a teenager. Jerry Siegel was around the edges of communist organizing. He wasn't, as far as I know, an active communist or anything like that, but he was interested in social causes and communist politics. And the bad guys in the first Jerry Siegel Superman stories are businessmen in suits, guys who are doing crooked, illegal shit that they shouldn't be doing. Later on, you have the mad scientists in lab coats, but even in the sort of mad scientist era, you still have these bad guys who are guys in suits and who really look like your boss or your landlord and not some weird guy in a costume. And that even lasts into the Silver Age revival when all the radical politics is totally stripped away from Superman. But the bad guys are still guys who look like your boss or your landlord and not a supervillain.
Yeah. And they definitely switched it up today. When you look at the movies, it's more, they add in the propaganda that they want people to sell. They add in the aesthetic of the American dream, and capitalism, stuff like that. But there still is that element of showing that
they still can't get rid of the fact that Captain America is the guy who looks at Nick Fury building the weapons using the Tesseract and says, "What the fuck are you doing? What is this shit?" So they kept that. They kept that in the first Avengers movie. Now, maybe that was because it wasn't quite Disneyfied yet.
Right.
I mean, that was the first Disney Marvel movie, but it wasn't as Disneyfied maybe as some of the later Marvel stuff that came out, because that was the culmination of all the stuff that was done at Marvel Studios prior to the Disneyfication.
Mm.
So it's possible that maybe the Captain America stuff that was so good was more the Marvel Studios era, and that we're not going to see anything that good in the Disney era. It's possible. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, of course, Disney is the guy who made a CIA agent one of the good guys in a movie about Africa. So,
yeah, I mean, it's a very good twist of how things have turned since Disney got fully involved. Now they're just wanting to be more comical, and it doesn't have that like sharp, dramatic effect that you had earlier. Which had showed the problems very well and well written very well. And just like the dynamic between Captain America and Iron Man, where you see the establishment capitalism versus the struggle to not want to be registered, to not be a part of the police state, to not, you know what I mean? Like it was a very good.
Well, Captain America has always been the guy who's not for the sort of DC Comics patriotism where Superman is truth, justice, in the American way later on, but Captain America is that guy who says, "This is what you told me America was. Now you better live up to it."
Right.
And there's something romantic and attractive about that. It's not really as. It's not really as dissident as it could be, but it's a big improvement over Love It or Leave It.
Yeah.
And of course, in the 80s, they did lots of interesting libertarian things. But back to Superman. Superman tore down the slums in the 1930s with the people in the slums cheering him on. And he beat up the slumlord. And he hunted the rich guy who was dressing up as Robin Hood and killing people for the fun of it and pretending to be a Robin Hood type. And it's interesting how some of those things changed, and you see this corporate Superman in the 1990s that doesn't have any resemblance to what was in the 30s.
Yeah, definitely. I apologize if you hear that dog barking. I don't know if you hear a dog barking.
I love dogs. So
Superman. One thing about the propaganda that DC have done, when you look at Wonder Woman, they kind of like tarnished Wonder Woman's legacy because they cast a terrorist. You want to say former terrorist? All right, whatever.
She still advocates for the terrorist organization. She still raises money for the terrorist organization. Right. I would call her a terrorist spokesperson.
They colonized the idea of Wonder Woman, because Wonder Woman wasn't this pro-colonial figure at all.
What Wonder Woman? The Wonder Woman movies are actually a great example of this sort of, even though it's Warner Brothers and not Disney, it's a great example of this corporatification of the comic book, because the original Wonder Woman character is delightfully weird. The original Wonder Woman character is a pacifist who goes out into the world during World War II, first to help the world defeat the Nazis, but with the intention of, after helping defeat the Nazis, showing the world that peace really isn't the best way, really is the best way, and that everybody should get along, and they should really do this United Nations thing. And it's this really aggressively different sort of story. Wonder Woman locks up her villains in a rehabilitation center on Paradise Island where they're slowly turned good. And a villain who was a spy for the Nazis ends up as Wonder Woman's chief scientific advisor and helping her reform other supervillains and turning them good. All women, of course.
Oh, wow.
Because these are female supervillains who are doing bad things for some reason and who come to Paradise Island and stay with the Amazons and learn feminism and become good people.
Mm.
And that they were all bad people because of some sort of oppression by men.
Mm.
And of course, there's a lot of spanking in those early Wonder Woman stories. Wonder Woman spanks the bad guys a lot, and a lot of bad guys turn good after being spanked by Wonder Woman. And it's kind of weird and freaky, but at the same time, it's the thing you have to remember, and this is both cool and weird at the same time. Mm-hmm. The guy who created Wonder Woman was a big believer in free love, which meant he had a wife and a girlfriend. His wife and his girlfriend both saw whoever they wanted.
Mm.
And because free love, and this is something that people don't completely understand today because they have a lot of either modern ideas about polyamory or more regressive things that they've heard about swinging or the party circuit or that sort of thing. And free love was about women being with who they wanted to be with, which meant for him, it was fine that his wife and his girlfriend wanted to be with him and also wanted to occasionally be with other people. And he understood that he had a certain amount of freedom to do the same thing, but they were also all in a relationship and they should be respectful of each other. But it was really about women having the freedom to be with who they wanted to be with rather than being required to be with who men wanted them to be with in a patriarchal system. Now, because the creator of Wonder Woman had this thing going on in his own life that he thought about very passionately, some of these ideas end up in the comic book, which is Wonder Woman is very much based on his and his wife's girlfriend. Now, one of the dynamics in their relationship was if he and his wife did bad things to each other, they were supposed to get spanked if they went out of line, because this was how they handled the boundaries in their relationship.
Wow.
And the girlfriend was the one who did the spanking.
Oh, wow.
So the girlfriend who spanks me and my wife when we're naughty is the superhero.
Wow. So what do we see now? That this Israeli terrorists, in contrast?
Well, they changed World War II to World War I in the first movie, which I never completely understood. But there is a historical context to the change,
right,
that fits the corporatification, whether it was intentional or not. And that is World War II, while it's more complicated, is seen to a great extent by a lot of people of a lot of political leanings, everywhere from traditional conservative to communist, as being a good war against Nazis.
Right.
Whatever you think of the United States, whatever you think of the UK, whatever you think of Winston Churchill, ultimately World War II is depending on your ideology, ultimately World War II is the good war where either the US and the UK or the USSR, depending on how you look at it, or if you're realistic, all three to various degrees, kick the asses of the Nazis. So there's all sorts of heroic mythology around World War II, which has a political anti-fascist tone to it.
Yeah.
Whereas World War I ultimately was a war between imperialist powers over the spoils of empire,
Yeah.
With the winning side carving up the losing side's empires and sharing them among themselves.
And when you say they were spoiled, they conquered the world. For people that's listening, they colonized everything that they can, and they started competing over what they colonized.
Well, when we talk about spoils, yes, that's perfect. So, perfect example.
Yeah.
When World War I broke out, what's now the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda and Burundi was all what was then the Congo, and was divided between Germany and Belgium in various places, mostly Germany. But after World War I, because the Germans had invaded Belgium, the entire Congo was given to Belgium to make up for the bad things Germany did to Belgium during the war. So that's where we get the Belgian Congo, the Rwandan genocide, Paul Kagame now, Museveni, no, I'm getting the name wrong. Sorry, Yoweri Museveni in Uganda, all this stuff. This comes directly out of the Germans and then the Belgians in the Congo. And the Belgians got the Congo because the Germans lost World War I.
Yep.
There was before World War I, there was a genocide in Namibia where an entire people were nearly destroyed by the occupying German military because they would not toe the colonial line.
And that was brought up recently last year to remind them.
Yes.
Because they act like they're so high and mighty.
You don't hear about this so much because it's a little later and it goes in but you think you would hear about it more because it ties into how bad the Nazis were.
Yeah.
You know that between World War I and World War II, there were still Black Germans who were born in colonies that had been German before World War I and had been members of the local ruling class who came back to Germany and were educated and who stayed in Germany. And because they were technically German subjects, were citizens as much as anybody else was of the Weimar Republic after after World War I and the political change. And the Nazis killed them all.
Mm. Yep.
And we don't hear about that nearly as much as we hear about some other portions of the Holocaust.
Right.
Because it was partially because it was a smaller number of people. And people, when you're talking about genocide, people have a tendency to get obsessed with numbers.
Yeah.
And they go with the biggest numbers because the biggest numbers make the most impression in their anti-genocide arguments, or so they say. But, I mean, 10,000 people may not be a lot of people, but if 10,000 people is all the Black Germans and they're all gone now, that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah. I did a post a while ago about how the Nazi propaganda, they made it, they made a lot of political cartoons about how it's wrong to be Jewish and it's wrong to be Black in Germany. Mm-hmm. Because Kanye brought the conversation up with talking about Hail Hitler, the conspiracy. Not a lot of Black people share this conspiracy, but there are some that do believe it, that Hitler was actually a friend of Africans. But
there's all sorts of fun grievance mythology out there in various right-wing subcultures, and there are all sorts of interesting and unique right-wing subcultures out there. I know there's a lot of what they call esoteric Hitlerism that's mixed up in a lot of white music and white culture in ways that you don't obviously see it. And if you're
in these metal bands now.
Yes, especially in a lot of metal bands. There was a whole thing when I was a kid, and then again in the 90s. When I was a kid, it was all spot the Nazis in punk so you don't buy their stuff. Don't buy the punk Nazi stuff. Stay away from skinheads. Get rid of the skinheads. And you had that same thing for a while in the 90s where anti-fascists in metal were like trying to run the Nazis out of metal, but then it seems like somewhere along the line the Nazis won because they had the better deals with the record companies or something.
Right. I'm showing visuals of the cartoon propaganda while you talk.
Oh yeah, terrible stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrible stuff from Germany but all of this, a lot of this stuff came from even before them, from the anti-Semitism imagery of Russia and Poland, even before Germany, and Germany absorbed a lot of that and made it worse. And then you had the whole right-wing stab in the back German nationalism, anti-Semitism conspiracy after World War I that was deliberately started by German generals as an excuse to why the best army in the world was defeated.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want to give up their egos, and so it had to be someone else's fault, and it was easiest for them to blame Jews.
Yep, sound like something the Democrats do today with Russia.
Well, I mean, today people like to find a bunch of different scapegoats.
Right.
For the Democrats, it's voters lately, which is kind of disturbing. Should the Democratic Party really be so anti-voter and quick to blame voters for having preferences?
Yeah, I was on the show yesterday on Bob Getty show. I was on two shows. The last show was pretty cool. Shouts out to Uncle Warren. He was really cool. But the first show, he just kept trying to get me with the gotcha questions. And, I love you, Bob Getty, but like, his gotcha question was, well, yes, it's messed up, but you see why we got to vote for Democrats so Trump doesn't win? And I'm like, they're literally funding a genocide. I'm a one-issue voter at this point for this election. I'm not voting for anyone that's funding a genocide. I don't care if it's a less barbaric genocide in your opinion, because the Republicans would do so much worse. And don't get me wrong, they will.
And
but
there were 4 anti-genocide candidates running.
Yeah,
4 of them.
I'm voting for Claudia de la Cruz. And
I can totally understand that.
Yeah.
I have 2 sets of opinions about that. But just for those who aren't aware, the 4 anti-genocide candidates running are Jill Stein for the Green Party, Claudia de la Cruz for the Party of Socialism and Liberation, Joseph Kishore for the Socialist Equality Party, and Chase Oliver for the Libertarian Party. Now, obviously, I don't recommend people voting for libertarians for all sorts of reasons, but even Chase Oliver is anti-genocide. There's even someone for anti-genocide Republicans to vote for.
Yeah. Cornel West, too, is running. So it's like...
Cornel West is also running. So that's 5 anti-genocide candidates. Though Cornel West has made some noises that make me wonder. He made it sound like he was worried about people in swing states not voting for him instead of Kamala Harris and maybe Trump winning, and made some noise about that I think hurt him some.
Yeah, he's still kind of sus.
And
relationship.
He's got entanglements that worry me because, well, I trust his personal goodness to a large degree. Some of his friends worry me, and he's been led to some very selfish positions in the past because of his academic position.
Right. Yeah.
He and a friend from Harvard, before he wasn't tenured and had to leave, he and a friend from Harvard stood up for the rights of people like Milo Yiannopoulos and Charles Murray to speak for money on college campuses and against the rights of students to express their objection to these people being paid speakers on their college campuses. And I think that was kind of a mistake on his part. But I understand why a guy who gets paid to speak on college campuses would have class solidarity with other people who get paid to speak on college campuses.
Like Hillary Clinton.
I don't think he has too much class solidarity with Hillary Clinton, but in the end, she does benefit from this same argument. It's true, and in this point of class solidarity, it is very worthwhile to mention that Noam Chomsky said that he would resign his tenured position at MIT if MIT refused to hire former Kennedy and Johnson military-industrial complex drone Walt Rostow as a history professor, despite Rostow's personal responsibility for deaths in the Vietnam War, because, we shouldn't be penalizing people for their political positions. It's like, dude, he did a genocide in Vietnam. This isn't just like he had bad political ideas. He's an actual genocide guy who did it for the president.
Yep. Yeah, Norm did do that.
and of course, and while I do not believe that he actually wrote the article in any way, there was that piece from 2020, 2022, that Cornel West let his name be used on in an article praising Ron DeSantis's education policies in Florida. Now, the reason he let his name be used on that article is because he's a member of an academic advisory board for a specific standardized test. And the guy who wrote that article, and he wrote like 10 articles all around the same time in a bunch of different publications, and all of them read like they're practically the same article and were definitely written by the same person, including the one with Cornel West's name on in addition to his. So I don't think West had any hand in actually writing it. Yeah. The CEO of this company, Jeremy Wayne Tate, who's the chairman of the advisory board as well, he's the guy who wrote all the articles. But West's name was used on one because he's a member of the academic advisory board. And the real purpose of these articles was to promote Jeremy Wayne Tate's alternate standardized test. Now, there were two interlocking things here. You've got the Nazi end of things, where this is a whole bunch of right-wing Christians and libertarian charter school people getting together to try to make it easier for religious schools owned by private companies to get state money. But at the same time, it's also a bunch of these people who are trying to make money off of the charter school movement, just grifting off of it. And it's people who really seem devoted to the idea of excluding queer people from school spaces.
Yeah. It's definitely a witch hunt at this point.
And so this is all linked together. And then my question is, okay, he's on the board with all these aggressively white supremacist and anti-queer people. And the one thing they all have in common is that they're Christian. Yeah. And that with the exception of Cornel West, they all have some expressed sympathy to Christian nationalism. Which then brings me, okay, on what level does Cornel West feel that he has common ground with Christian nationalists? Is it just that he thinks somehow we should all be Christians and ecumenical together, radical Christians and Christian nationalists alike? Because, I mean, I don't know how Christian I feel on any given day of the week. I'd say it depends. But that's how I was brought up. And my mom is a radical Christian preacher who believes in things like, people being created equal by God and everybody should love everybody and take care of the poor and radical Christian socialism type stuff that you don't hear very much from Christians these days.
Oh, no. My parents are pastors as well, too.
And I don't
total opposite.
You can't square. You can't square my mom's Christianity with Jerry Falwell Jr. or Franklin Graham or any of this crazy stuff. You can't square that with what my mother preaches.
Right.
And I don't understand why someone would be on that board unless it's for, the only thing that one gains, there are only three things that people gain from being on those boards. One, ego value. You're allowed to say you're allowed to list this as one of the boards you're on in your list of academic and well, it's one of those things that makes you more desirable as a professor if you're on a lot of boards. It's part of your tenure track. It's one of those things a tenured professor is expected to do.
Mm.
But at the same time, the second reason is money. You're getting some sort of gratuity for being on this board. Professors have lots of opportunities to make money. Look at Elizabeth Warren. And then number 3 is because you actually believe in what the board is doing. Now, I'm not sure that I believe that Cornel West believes in what a board mostly composed of Christian nationalists is doing. And I've been told by people who believe they know what he's doing that this was some harm reduction thing on his part. But if he doesn't believe in what the board is doing, then that still comes back to either ego or money being involved. And is that really a good reason?
Yeah, I think these are your concerns that you are giving is definitely things that I've thought about, and I've never actually talked about with anyone. Because I don't want to dump on his campaign. But at the end of the day, these are conversations that need to be had, because when people bring them up, what is his answer?
Well, I mean, if I were supporting Cornel West, right. I'm not really supporting anyone. My position roughly is that if I thought it was a fair election where every candidate had an equal chance to win, I would probably support Joseph Kishore for some labor reasons and for some COVID-related reasons.
That's the Libertarian
Socialist Equality Party.
Oh, Socialist Equality Party. Okay.
Joseph Kishore, he's been on my show a few times. I have a friendly relationship with him and some other people who write for their website. He's a good guy. I don't agree with everything their website says, but on labor and COVID, they're pretty consistently good. And public health matters right now. And so that would be if I thought it was a fair election where every candidate had an equal chance to win, if enough people chose to vote for them, he would be my choice. But the election being what it is, I feel that there is a certain pragmatism to voting Green, simply because they are the only single party that isn't Democrat or Republican that theoretically has enough ballot access to win enough electoral votes to actually win the election.
Yeah,
and I believe on a basic pragmatic level, there is a very strong argument for everyone who is against the genocide to vote Green for that reason.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to tell anybody not to do that. And I understand why people would. And on a pragmatic level, if I were the sort of person who voted for president, I would probably vote for Jill Stein right now for that reason. I admit it.
Did you see her interview on the Breakfast Club? I think it's
I did not.
Mainstream interviews.
That was the one where that's the one where Angela Rye tried to. Yeah. I did a lot. I saw various clips of that afterwards.
Yeah.
And I went semi-viral saying that the reason that liberals were trying to make Angela Rye out to be such a hero and Jill Stein such a villain was because the actual facts were that Jill Stein tore Angela Rye a new one, and Angela Rye looked really, really bad and weak and bullying.
Yeah, no. She literally looked like she was just there to try to dismember their movement.
Yeah.
And she even tried to say that you are like trying to like go over people of color and stuff like that. I'm like, her VP pick is literally a black man, and she's a Jewish woman that
if someone
Palestinian, like, can you show some respect at least? Like,
if someone were asking me to criticize the Green Party, if someone were asking me to criticize the Green Party, I would say, with all due respect to Jill Stein, why the fuck weren't a Jamu Baraka, Angela Davis? No, not Angela Davis. I can't remember her last name, and that's my fault. But Howie Hawkins' running mate in 2020.
Oh, that guy.
Angela. And Butch Ware. Why weren't their running mates the presidential nominees? Why were Ajamu and Butch Ware and Angela in 2020 not the presidential nominees? Because honestly, they're more impressive than Jill and Howie. Now, I have a lot of respect for Jill Stein, and I don't mean to trash her. She's an outspoken activist. She's someone who's been there and talking the talk and walking the walk for a long time and taking consequences for what she does. In 2012, she and Sherry Honkala were held incommunicado by the Secret Service because they tried to participate in the presidential debates, and the Secret Service didn't want that to happen and thought that was, a terrorist threat to the presidential candidates for a third party to try to participate in the debates.
This is our country, guys. Just remember.
So they held the Green Party presidential candidate and VP candidate incommunicado in 2012 for trying to participate in the debates.
Ridiculous.
But that said, I think that Ajamu Baraka would have been a more impressive presidential candidate than Jill Stein. I think Butch Ware would be a more impressive presidential candidate than Jill Stein.
I don't like Howie at all.
I don't like Howie Hawkins either. And there's a whole bunch of arguments for that. But regardless of whether you like or dislike Howie Hawkins, Angela was a better orator, was more impressive, was more powerful in her arguments.
I remember her. I remember when
Angela Walker. That's it. Angela Walker.
She ran for VP under Howie, right? Yeah.
She ran for VP under Howie, and she was not actually a Green. She came over from the Socialist Party as part of their Green-Red Alliance in 2020 to try to unite as much power and ballot access as they could in one ticket. And there was some backlash about that from some of the diehard Green Party people. And there also, it turned out, Howie has a good background. He's one of the Green Party founders. Disagree with him or dislike him all you want. He's still somebody who's a Green Party guy, but
still a founding father. Yeah.
His campaign chairman, who was also the chair of the Colorado State Green Party, turned out to be a mole for the Democrats.
Is that why he had his Ukraine views?
So Howie really does have some problematic Ukraine views.
Yeah.
Howie is kind of a Russiagator.
Yeah.
Howie is kind of a stop Putin in Ukraine guy.
Yeah.
That's my problem with Howie.
Yeah.
Also, he's kind of dull. At the same time, Angela Walker was amazing. I would have loved to see Angela Walker at the top of that ticket, not just because of my feelings about Howie, but because Angela was impressive. And like I said, I love Jill Stein. I have lots of respect for Jill Stein, but both the Ajamu and Butch are more impressive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, that's my criticism of the Green Party. I like their VP candidates better than their presidential candidates. When you really look at it, that's not a horrible criticism.
Yeah. Hey, Alex, how's it going?
Hey, good. I had some technical issues, so I wasn't able to come in earlier. How's everything?
It's good. It's good. We still got 20 minutes left. We good on time. 22 minutes, actually. We were talking about the candidates.
Yeah, I wanted to say something about Jill Stein.
Yeah.
So what's crazy is, and I alluded to this on Chris's show the other day, so the Democrats must think that she's not going to run in battleground states, that she's not going to do the whole campaign. I don't know what, but they're pushing her into the arms of Arab Americans with their right-wing positions on Israel.
The Democrat,
and maybe they think she's not going to run in Florida or other battleground states. She ran twice already.
No, they know she's running there. They know she's running there. They ran.
There's more Arab Americans that support her now in battleground states than Kamala.
I know it's amazing, but just this last week they started attacking Jill Stein in their media. They're not attacking Donald Trump. They're attacking Jill Stein. They launched an anti-Jill Stein ad that was advertised on the news because that's how they put the ads out there that they want everybody to see, but they don't necessarily want to actually pay for them. So they put them together and then leak them to the news, and the news runs the ad for them, and then they don't have to pay for the TV time.
Well, both Republicans and Democrats believe that Jill, or at least claim to believe that Jill Stein takes votes from Democrats. So a lot of Republican leaders have said, "Oh, we don't mind Jill Stein at all." Even Trump said that, but it's not true. If you look at the statistics, these are people that were not going to vote anyways.
So the people who were representing the Green Party in their case in Nevada, and this is are Republican lawyers. And the reason the Republican lawyers were representing the Green Party in their case in Nevada is because the Republican version of the ALCU, the ALCJ, ALJU, I can never remember what those idiots call themselves. But the Republican version of the ACLU has cases ready to go all the time about Democrats keeping people off ballots using lawsuits. They're the people who represent Republicans who are trying to defend their ballot access in their petitions. So when the ACLJ, assuming that I'm getting that right, ACLJ, when the Americans, or AJLU or whatever, when the Republican version of the ACLU comes along and says, "Hey, we'll take your case right now. We'll represent you in court. We've got everything ready to go, and we're not going to charge you." What are you going to say if you have to run against if you're trying to run against the Democrats? What are you going to say if the Democrats are suing you off the ballot?
The point I was trying to make is what those Republican lawyers don't understand is that you actually look at the statistics of the last two times that Joe Stein ran in 2012 and 2016.
Yeah,
the overwhelming majority of people that said that they voted for her said they would not have voted otherwise.
Of course.
So I don't know why they're assuming that they're Democrats. And there was a lot of people that were upset with Gary Johnson who were libertarians in 2016.
It's propaganda.
That voted for Jill Stein. These are people on the right that voted for Jill Stein who were coming in from a American libertarian background. So no, it's not exclusively Democrats. That's
Jill
absurd.
Stein has always, and I don't mean, and this is a political criticism and not a Jill Stein is a bad person or a secret right-winger criticism. This is just a political thing. Jill Stein has always made certain noises. Less lately, which is good, but she's always made certain noises that would be welcoming, not necessarily I'm on your side, but welcoming to what I would call the RFK Jr. libertarian. The guy who doesn't want his kids vaccinated and believes Wi-Fi is giving him brain cancer.
He's certainly using plenty of Wi-Fi and social media while he's at that, right?
But I want to be a point is that she made some noises in that direction in 2016.
You know who has the best position on Palestine except for Claudio de la Cruz? I know Comrade Jamar supports Claudio de la Cruz. Who has the best position on Palestine out of all the presidential candidates, minus Claudio de la Cruz, is Jill Stein, and she's Jewish. Her position on Palestine is even better than Cornel West. This is what the last straw for me when Cornel West was. After October 7th, Cornel West described
we were just talking about that too. Yeah,
as occupying Israel. He said the resistance in Palestine was occupying Israel. He actually said that. And so Jill Stein's position actually is better, is to the left of Cornel West.
Well, I mean, Palestine. Well, to the best of my knowledge, since you mentioned it, Jill Stein is running in swing states, and Cornel West made some noises in one of his press releases that suggested he thought maybe people in swing states should vote for Kamala Harris and not him.
There you go. That means he's not a serious candidate.
That means he's a Noam Chomsky candidate, whatever else he says.
Yeah. I mean,
even Nader takes that position now. He didn't before.
Which
now
position?
Nader says, if you're in a swing state, Yep.
Everybody's real. You got to remember, all of these people are people who have more to lose under Trump than under Harris, and they are not concerned about the people who are losing stuff under Harris and will continue to lose stuff under Trump.
Yeah, definitely.
They're concerned about it's. You can see it when Keith Olbermann goes after Peter Dow on Twitter and says, well, maybe you can be like that, but some of us don't want to be drowned in the rivers of blood Trump will unleash, you motherfucker. And Peter Dow is talking about he, as a Lebanese American Arab Christian, cannot vote for a candidate who is supporting a military that is committing atrocities in his home country, calling him a motherfucker for saying this.
Well, also, where I differ with Claudia de la Cruz and the PSL leadership, and Comrade Jamar knows this, and actually the Trotskyists, and you know this, Chris, take the same position on this. Russia, they define Russia as an imperialist country.
Well,
I disagree with that.
So I will make one. I still make one. I will make one correction.
Richard, go ahead. Jamar's part of PSL. You can answer that.
Chris,
go ahead.
Yeah, Chris. Well, I'm no longer with the PSL right now. I'm taking a hiatus because I have a lot going on in my life. But the PSL line, we don't see Russia as an imperialist. We had a whole discussion on it in the class last time I was there to explain what imperialism is, and also explain how the U.S. is imperialist, and then break down how Russia current system is not imperialist. There were some people that did believe that, so it was good that we had that discussion to this, because I think there are some people that support the PSL that has not fully been at all the classes, and then they'll probably say something online that's definitely against the line. The PSL does not see Russia as a imperialist.
I wasn't aware of that.
And
it's probably with somebody that didn't know any better that said some shit like that.
The Socialist Equality Party does not see Russia as a, quote, imperial power, unquote. They see Russia as a capitalist nation that is attempting to renegotiate its place within the system of empire, which is important and different and true. Putin is a capitalist. Putin is not a socialist.
Yeah,
Putin does not support socialism or communism
whatsoever.
But I do
see him as an anti-imperialist. Do you agree with that?
No, because Putin is not opposed to the imperial system. Putin is trying to renegotiate his seat at the table within the imperial system. Remember, Russia was a G8 country when it was still the G8.
We have to remember also that the resistance in Novorossiya, and this was before the Russians stepped in, are primarily socialist and anti-imperialist. So he's importing anti-imperialists in their ambitions to get the Ukrainian Nazis out of their territory.
Yeah, he's also been importing some unpleasant Russian nationalist elements too, so it goes both ways.
Well, he has differences with the Russian nationalists that were part of that mercenary group.
Well, there have been all sorts
of that group where the founder.
Well, I don't want to get too much into Russian internal politics, because I feel that Russian internal politics is something we don't have any real control of, not being in Russia.
Right.
What I will say is that my understanding is that, and I agree with the SEP on this, Russia was a G8 country. During the Cold War, the USSR was one of the two hegemons in a system of competing hegemonies. The USSR's hegemony may have been materially better for more people, but it was still a hegemony when you consider that, with the exception of Yugoslavia, there was no actual organic communist revolution in any of the Eastern Bloc nations. Communist governments were imposed on them as part of the denazification process.
Yeah,
and in many of those nations,
21 constitutions,
in many of those nations, opposition to the USSR was bound up in both liberal national, quote-unquote, democratic parties and Nazi-leaning parties. And the Nazi-leaning and liberal democratic-leaning parties tended to work together against the Soviet establishment on behalf of the West in ways that were harmful to people in the Soviet sphere. But at the same time, you can't get beyond the fact that the reason, despite the fact that the people of East Germany were materially better off than the people in West Germany in many ways. You can't get past the fact that East Germany's legitimacy was undermined by the activities of the Stasi against originally Nazis, but as time went on, these liberal democratic elements that began, quote, democratic, unquote, liberal elements that began to align themselves with the Nazis because they too were anti-communist.
I wanted to make a quick point. What I was referring to earlier was the Wagner Group, and also I completely agree with you on Yugoslavia, because Yugoslavia was part of the non-aligned nations. They were not under the sphere of the Soviet.
Well, no, Tito overthrew both the Yugoslavian Nazi puppet regime, and the Nazi occupation, primarily on his own, without a Russian invasion. And as a result, he was the only one who had an organic movement in his own country that actually supported his government. Well, which is also why he had autonomy from Stalin that other leaders didn't have.
That's right. And what you really have to admire about Tito is he's a great example of a leader who used socialism to unite all the different ethnicities and groups together, who went into war later where NATO took advantage of the divisions to invade, especially the United States. But Tito kept it together. He was a great leader. I would say his biggest mistake was not finding a successor.
Well, he had two mistakes. Number one, not finding a successor, and number two, and this undermined the international movement, and he pressed some what I would call liberal nationalist territorial claims against other communist countries.
Like Romania?
Romania, Hungary, it was Balkan stuff.
I thought it was Albania. He had difference with Albania.
Well, there was some stuff with there was Albania was part of it, but there were some other places in the area too. But yes, Enver Hoxha became very anti-Tito later on.
Well, let's table this discussion
was
because we're running out of time. I want to get into the meat and bones, back to the domestic politics.
Yes.
I think that was really good back and forth on it too. And it goes to show that it's important to have these discussions so people can get a full understanding on imperialism. Kamala Harris did a 60 Minutes interview, and I don't know if you guys saw it or not, but they heavily edited her answers, which was,
of course, it wasn't
if you're
live.
Going to do that, like,
she
don't
couldn't
even
read from a
release
script, from a teleprompter.
So
Right.
I don't want to echo the Trump criticism of Kamala Harris.
Mm-hmm.
What I will say is it's very disturbing that CBS News doesn't want us to know what Kamala Harris really said.
Very weird.
Let's hope for a whistleblower that gets the actual footage of.
Right.
Speaking of whistleblowers, what do you guys think about Assange's first public appearance on my birthday, October 1st, in France?
Oh yeah, was that when he was talking about how his only crime was being a journalist?
He said that he agreed to the plea deal because that was the only crime that was actually journalism.
Mm-hmm.
He was making the point of how absurd this case is.
Yes,
and the Americans agreed to that.
He was also straight up honest. Straight up honest, and he said, I was tired of being in prison, and I wanted to get out, and I wanted to be with my family again, so I made a deal.
Let's got married,
Well, they tried to stop him from getting married. And they wouldn't allow wedding pictures, and they had to do the marriage, in the dungeon of Belmarsh. Just incredibly inhumane treatment of him. And now he's a free man; he can travel the world.
Yeah.
And I just want them to let Leonard and Mumia go too now.
Yeah,
absolutely. They're both having health issues too, just on humanitarian grounds. They should.
Yes, Leonard Peltier should have been released just on humanitarian grounds in 2020 when he got sick and had to drop off the PSL ballot.
Yeah, that was before my time, before I joined. That was, I heard about that and I was like, that's so dope. But
he had to drop out. He had to drop out because he got sick. And it's not like he would have been in prison. So there's only so much he can do anyway. But if he's sick enough to not even be able to do what he would have been able to do from prison, that means he's pretty sick, and you've got a good argument for humanitarian release.
Right. Why do you think they keep him? They're like holding on, keeping him for so long.
So the people I will give you the excuse. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the reason is that he's an indigenous activist who doesn't support American rule over his homeland.
Right.
I mean, their problem with Leonard Peltier is Israel's problem with the Palestinians. Their problem with Leonard Peltier is Turkey's problem with the head of the Kurdish Democratic Socialist Party.
Yep.
Their problem with Leonard Peltier is the apartheid South Africa's problem with Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's the big picture answer. The excuse is that they bring in the family of Anna Marie Aquash every time he comes up for parole. And Anna Marie Aquash's family says, our daughter was murdered by the American Indian movement for no other reason than Leonard Peltier thought that she was a double agent for the FBI, and she wasn't even a double agent for the FBI. His ass deserves to be in prison. Now, the problem with this is he has never been tried or convicted for Anna Mae Aquash's murder. She is not a victim of the crimes for which he is in prison. And there has never been any conclusive evidence that he was involved in her murder in any way.
By the way, Asada Shakur is still on the FBI's most wanted list, and she's enjoying the benefits of the healthcare system in Cuba.
Yes.
She outlived her stepsister, Tupac Shakur's mother, who passed away already. Even if you have money in this country, if you're a person of color or oppressed nation, whatever you want to call it, because obviously she had the money that she inherited from her son's, record deals. You're still going to die young. She died pretty young, I think. When did Asada's stepsister die? Was that Afeni Shakur? She died
Afeni Shakur. Give me just a sec.
Yeah, but as far as I know, Asada's still around.
Yeah, she's still in Cuba.
Yeah, she's living a long life. I think she's in her 70s now.
Yeah, and I'm glad that Trump really wants to get her back, but I haven't seen.
Afeni was 69, so she didn't die young, but she didn't die. She didn't live as long as some people who have sold out have.
Yeah.
Yep.
And here, I wanted to show this before we close out. There's an American journalist that worked for the Gray Zone. Shout out to the Gray Zone; they do so much great work. I had the pleasure of meeting Ben Norton one time at a conference at Howard University.
I love Ben Norton, but I do want to break in and say he did leave the Gray Zone and is with, I think, Breakthrough News now.
Yeah, he's with Breakthrough News now. Yep.
He moved from Central to China.
I support Ben Norton. I also want to say that despite my high regard for Jeremy Lafredo and the fact that I want him to be released, I also support Ben Norton in his dispute with Max Blumenthal and his wife.
Ooh.
I take the same position.
Wait.
With that.
Hold on, guys. Let's talk about that because I was not aware.
It was a pretty big deal, man. He left the Gray Zone over it.
Yeah, this is why he doesn't work for the Gray Zone anymore. Yes.
Okay.
Chris,
so during the real right-wing backlash against COVID protections, Max Blumenthal and his wife Anya, who is his partner and co-boss at the Gray Zone. Let's remember they're owners. Max and Anya are owners and bosses, and that's the way you have to think about it when you're looking at their issues with Ben Norton and vice versa. So my only assumption, and I will note that I have no proof of this. This is a totally unfounded allegation in my part based on speculation. It is something I believe and am alleging but cannot yet prove. So I will say that, this is a suspicion, not a fact. That said, we know from testimony of people who used to work with him that Jimmy Dore took money from a billionaire philanthropy that was funding quote-unquote independent journalism, that Aaron Mate, who was working for the Gray Zone at the time, and Jen Dyes, who was starting her own independent platform at the time, all took money from this group.
I didn't know about Jen Dyes taking money from. She used
Jen Dyes stopped
crazy.
taking money from this group when they started demanding anti-vax, COVID denial, anti-mask content in their messaging. Aaron Mate and Jimmy Dore, according to the testimony of people who used to work with them, Graham Elwood and Ron Placone, did not stop taking the money. And Graham Elwood and Ron Placone stopped working with Jimmy Dore around the same time Ben Norton stopped working with Max and Anya. And where Aaron Mate, who was working for Max and Anya at the time, as well as with Jimmy Dore, was taking the money, which leads me to believe that Max and Anya were taking the money and still are, and that's why their COVID position has always been shit, and why they're all
offshore accounts.
anti-trans.
If it's true, it's an offshore account. That's why it's hard to trace. But
yes,
I had a question. So there's a network, and I can't believe I can't think of its name right now.
But anyway, sorry.
Where
I was, Ben Norton quit.
The network that Zaina was a part of.
Yes.
Jen Dyce used to be part of it. What was
Status
the network
Coup.
called? That's right, Status Coup. Yeah, I was just curious.
Status Coup broke a lot of this story. Walker Bragman broke some of this story.
Right,
there was good coverage of this. Ben Norton broke this story when he quit. He announced when he was leaving that the reason he was leaving was because of the Gray Zone having embraced all this right-wing anti-vax grievous mythology.
Yeah, like how the hell did I miss this?
It's quite possible they're in favor of vaccines personally, like privately. Yeah. But they're taking this position to keep getting the money, and that's
the thing. They want the money. They don't think it's important.
Yeah,
and they think that the movement for medical freedom is somehow compatible with their mission against imperialism.
Yeah, well, Max, you get an L for this one. Definitely.
And I was really disappointed. I mean, I even at one point supported Max, but I was really disappointed about Mate because I loved Mate and his work, and his father I think does great work. But when I found out he took the money too, and that was the one that was traced, I was very upset about that.
Yeah, Aaron Mate is a really, really great journalist.
But maybe he really believes. Max. I mean, I don't know.
He like Max and Anya has always kind of fed into these sort of right-wing grievance mythology sort of ideas, on the idea that this will get clicks and bring people in, and we'll be able to turn these anti-establishment people into our kinds of people somehow.
Well, you might not know
what it actually seems to do is turn the people trying to do this into progressively less reliable and trustworthy comrades.
Well, you might not know this, Jamar, but Chris and I interviewed Lee Camp once, and I saw on Lee Camp's show the other day, and Lee Camp had me on as well, but I saw on Lee Camp's show the other day, he didn't say the name of the person, but he alluded to the fact that some people in the alternative media world are taking right-wing positions, so they'll have clickbait and ratings, and Lee doesn't do that, but he knows people that does. I mean, he knows.
Well, he's in the middle of a clique that does that, and even if he does not do that himself, he has been accused of doing it, and has platformed people in his group who do it. So I don't know whether he does it or not. I know that there are people who believe he does.
Yeah.
And those people believe it because of their work studying that clique.
This is why it's important.
There was 2 people that mysteriously quit. Ben Norton and Jen Dyce. This is the first time hearing Jen Dyce be involved with that.
Jen Dyce started her own platform. She was taking money in order to start the platform. She stopped taking the money when they started asking for specific kinds of content.
Oh, okay. That was good of her to do that.
She said, I'm not going to take the money anymore. And when Ron Placone and Graham Elwood said started talking about the reasons they weren't working with Jimmy anymore, Jen Dyes said, yes, I can verify this. I took this money. They asked me to do X, Y, and Z. So I said no and stopped taking this money.
I don't think Jordan Sheridan would do that either. So it's
I don't think
yeah.
There are criticisms that I can make of Jordan, but I think that whatever problems he has, he's trying to do the right thing as he sees it. I don't think he likes admitting mistakes, which is a problem we all have. And by we, I mean white people. We don't like admitting being wrong, and I think that's part of Jordan's problem. It is what it is. He does try to do good. He does try to do good stuff overall. He seems to have really rejected the idea that we can still get anywhere by supporting liberals. He's not saying people have to support Kamala Harris the way he was saying people have to support Joe Biden.
Yeah.
You see, he's grown and learned, even if
he's evolved with Israel and Palestine. He actually, at one point, was kind of Zionist, but he's evolved from that as now.
I don't know about that one way or the other. I haven't looked enough, but yes, he's definitely the whole reason that he broke from this idea that Kamala Harris was going to be great was because she wouldn't back away from Biden's genocide and has made noises that make it her genocide too.
But we have two prominent Jewish voices. Jill Stein, great position on Palestine. Jordan Sheridan, in the alternative media. It just really pisses me off when these things are going on and people are ignoring the tens of thousands of Jews being arrested for Palestine and this continued anti-Semitic narrative that all Jews that they have to support what Israel's doing. That is anti-Semitic.
My friend Eugene, who supports Israel and who argues with Alex about Venezuela because he has relatives in Venezuela who sort of support the Venezuelan Communist Party, and who lives in Colombia, where he's been giving me great news about the Western-backed coup to try to overthrow Petro. He's Jewish, and he is extremely outspoken against what's going on in Palestine, and extremely anti-Zionist. He's one of the most outspoken and dedicated anti-Zionists I know.
Well, so is the president of Chile. You know what I mean? And the president of Chile is sold out on every other issue. So I can agree with somebody on one thing, right? Like I agree with Boric on that.
Yeah.
Although let's look at what Boric's done. He's not ruptured diplomatic relations with Israel like Bolivia did, like Colombia did.
True.
So now that he has the power to do something about his advocacy, his whole life of being pro-Palestine, he was known for that in Chile. Now he's not doing it.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. We're not hearing rumors about coups overthrowing Boric the way we're hearing rumors about coups overthrowing Maduro and Petro and Lula and the guy who they did overthrow in Peru.
Yeah.
Let's remember also that the clever way they managed to, the way they set him up, and this is my conspiracy theory for you.
This will be the last thought, by the way, because I gotta go.
And this is my conspiracy theory. Anyone who's interested, check out Eclectic Radical on Yahoo, on Twitter, on Substack, on Patreon.
I used to co-host it. I endorse the show still.
But my conspiracy theory is that my conspiracy theory in Peru is that Dina Boluarte was put on the ticket as a sleeper agent by anti-communists, that she had a deal with with the guy in Peru's political enemies.
Castillo's,
Pedro Castillo, that's the guy. With Castillo's political enemies in the right wing, she had a deal in place to be their person if this constitutional crisis ever came up, that she was the safeguard for the liberals against Castillo's sort of kind of open involvement with more communist socialist groups.
Well, I have ties to Peru, and I'll tell you this. I agree with everything you said except for her running on the ticket part, because she actually didn't run as Pedro Castillo's VP.
That's right. She replaced the original VP after something.
Yes, there was a couple changes in the cabinet of VPs, and when she took over, she was no longer VP. She had no constitutional authority to take over at that point. But she was a former VP that was probably sent in to infiltrate his party. I agree with you on that.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. I hate her.
but I believe that she was in that position in the first place to be their person if anything happened.
I agree.
Yeah. All right, guys.
It
Well,
still happened
let's
behind
end
bars.
it here.
But Assange was freed. Alex Saab was freed. Let's
Yeah.
hope next Pedro Castillo and all the political prisoners of the empire are free.
Yes.
Yeah.
Free Mumia. Free Leonard.
Yeah, and free Mumia and free Leonard. Definitely, they need to be freed. Let's close it from here and get you guys back on another time very soon as well too, so we don't have to wait months out ahead. Thank you for coming on the show and being the first guest for the new season of Savory Politik. This was a really good discussion that we had. For everybody, please like, share, subscribe. Please check out Eclectic Radical. And also, you see the information below. Please donate to Pal Christ Relief on Instagram, where they have helped over 100,000 displaced families in Gaza with tents and materials. Your donations will be very, very received to help people. So please check that out and
Take care, comrades.
have a really